Welcome to the world of science fiction stories, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe my channel. Enjoy the listening. Human war veteran adopts rare albino dragon. Then discovers it speaks perfect English. Tom Braddock had never owned much in his life. His time in the Galactic forces had left him with little more than a battered duffel bag, a few medals collecting dust, and enough credits to keep a roof over his head in a low-tier space station on the fringes of RN4. It was enough for him, or at least he told himself it was. Then the letter arrived. It was waiting for him outside his cramped apartment in an officially looking envelope, sealed with an insignia he didn't recognize. At first, he tore it open with little thought, half expecting it to be another bureaucratic form or a veteran's benefits notice. Instead, the words inside made him pause. Thomas Braddock, in recognition of your bravery and service to the royal house of Wiener, the late Prince Kaler has bequeathed to you a most precious gift, a companion, a guardian, and a creature of great value. This inheritance is to be delivered to your custody immediately. May you honor this gift as you have honored the stars. There was no contact information, no explanation, just a signature that shimmered slightly in the dim light of his apartment. Tom read the letter again and again. Prince Kaler, he remembered that name from a diplomatic mission gone sideways, pirates, and a firefight in the dark corridors of a crumbling freighter. Tom had been one of the few who made it out alive, dragging the wounded prince to safety. He hadn't thought about it much since, but this was the gift from a dead prince. His thoughts were interrupted by the sudden buzz of his apartment's intercom. The station's AI voice chimed in with an emotionless, metallic delivery. In Docking Bay 12, recipient Thomas Braddock. Tom's gut tightened. Something told him this was going to be complicated. Tom stood in Docking Bay 12, arms crossed, watching as the cargo was carefully offloaded. A team of handlers dressed in military-grade uniforms, their faces tense, moved around a large, reinforced container whose surface hummed with the soft glow of containment fields. He didn't like the look of this. One of the handlers, a woman with sharp gray eyes, approached him. "Brack," she said. Tom nodded. "That's me," he replied. She gave him a long, scrutinizing look before tapping something on her wrist console. "Sign here," she ordered. Tom glanced at the datapad she extended. The manifest was brief: 1, genetically engineered life form, status, secure. He hesitated. What exactly am I inheriting here? The woman's lips twitched, almost amused. You don't know. Tom shook his head. She exhaled through her nose. Well, she said, gesturing to the crate, you're about to find out. With a sharp nod to her team, she stepped back. As the containment field deactivated with a soft hiss, the locks on the crate clicked open. The air felt heavier, charged with something just beneath the surface. And then the doors slid apart. Inside, curled within the shadows, was a dragon. Tom felt his pulse spike. It was massive, even crouched low, with its serpentine body coiled like a living sculpture of pale marble. Its scales were pure white, tinged with a faint, iridescent shimmer as though they had captured fragments of distant stars. Sleek, elegant wings were folded neatly against its back, their edges glowing faintly where the light touched them. But what struck Tom the most were its eyes. They were silver, sharp, and impossibly intelligent, watching him, studying him. And then it spoke. The dragon said, its voice smooth and distinctly human, laced with something like amusement, "So you are the one Kaler chose." Tom stared, his brain momentarily refused to function. "Did you just?" He started, then stopped, rephrasing, "You can talk." The dragon tilted its head in a slow, measured motion. Obviously, Tom let out a low breath, dragging a hand down his face. "Of course you can, because nothing in my life can ever be simple," the dragon chuckled, a deep, resonant sound. "If you wanted a simple life, Thomas Braddock, you would not have saved a prince." Tom's stomach dropped. It knew his name, it knew about Kaler. It spoke better than half the people he'd met in the military. "What the hell are you?" he asked in a quieter voice. The dragon slowly uncurled itself, stepping forward on clawed feet that barely made a sound against the metal floor. Its long tail flicked behind it in a slow, deliberate motion. "I'm called Zephyr," it said. "I was once a gift, a creature of diplomacy created to bridge the gaps between worlds." It stopped just a few feet from Tom, lowering its head slightly as if assessing him. "But now, it seems I belong to you." Tom felt lightheaded. "This is insane," he muttered. "You belong to no one. I don't even know what to do with a talking dragon." Zephyr hummed, his silver eyes gleaming. "Then it seems we will have much to learn from each other." Tom stared at the magnificent, impossible being before him, realizing two things at once. One, his life had just changed forever, and two, he had absolutely no idea what he was supposed to do next. Tom sat in his cramped apartment, staring at the albino dragon stretched out in the corner like a particularly oversized cat. Zephyr's luminous white scales shimmered under the dim station lighting, his silver eyes half-lit but never losing that sharp intelligence. Tom still wasn't sure if he had lost his mind or if the universe was just playing some cruel joke on him, a talking dragon, a gift from a dead prince. The absurdity of it all made him want to laugh, but he doubted Zephyr would appreciate the reaction. So Tom exhaled, rubbing his temples. "Let's start with the obvious, how the hell do you talk?" Zephyr flicked his tail lazily. Amusement, evident in my voice. "You humans always find that part so fascinating. Your kind is engineered with artificial intelligence translated into the dialects of insectoid species, yet a speaking dragon is where your mind fractures." Tom scowled. "It's not just the talking, it's the way you talk. You sound human." Zephyr's silver eyes gleamed. "Because I was created to be understood by all." That made Tom pause. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "What does that mean?" Zephyr shifted his long limbs, folding beneath him with unnatural grace. "I was not born, I was designed, an ambassadorial creation intended to serve as a bridge between species. My mind was sculpted for communication, my voice crafted to echo familiarity to anyone who hears it. To a Tan, I sound human, to an Alan, I sound like one of their own." Tom's brows furrowed. "So you're a diplomatic tool." Zephyr gave a slow blink. Once, the weight of that word wasn't lost on Tom, there was history there, something deep and unresolved. But before he could press further, Zephyr exhaled, changing the subject with fluid ease. "Kaler believed I should be more than just a gift to grease political wheels. He thought of me as a being, not a possession." Zephyr studied Tom for a long moment. "I assume that is why he left me to you." Tom let out a humorless laugh. "Yeah, well, he should have asked first." Zephyr chuckled. "You saved his life." In his eyes, this was a worthy repayment. Tom shook his head, leaning back against the couch. "I didn't save him for a reward, I know." Zephyr murmured, "That is why he chose you." A silence stretched between them, broken only by the faint hum of the station's ventilation systems. Tom drummed his fingers on his thigh, processing everything. This wasn't just some strange pet dumped in his lap, this was a creature engineered to understand people, to adapt, to communicate, and for some reason, he'd been deemed worthy of keeping him. Zephyr shifted his voice softer. "Now, do you intend to keep me?" Tom sighed. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do with you." The dragon let out a quiet, knowing hum. "Then it seems we have much to figure out." Tom woke up to a sharp chime from his terminal, the alert flashing with an urgency that immediately put him on edge. "Incoming transmission, priority level red." His gut twisted. Nothing good ever came from priority level messages. He rubbed the sleep from his eyes and activated the display. A holographic screen flickered to life, revealing the stern face of Commander Juno V.S., one of the high-ranking officers in the Galactic Security Bureau. Her short, cropped hair was as severe as her expression. "Braddock," she greeted, skipping any formalities, "you've inherited something valuable." Tom's shoulders tensed. He didn't ask how she knew. The moment Zephyr had stepped off that transport crate, it was only a matter of time before someone important noticed. "I'm retired, Commander," Tom said flatly. "Whatever this is, I'm not involved." "Vest," she said, not blinking. "You don't have the luxury of ignoring this." She tapped at her console, and another file appeared on the screen, a grainy surveillance image of Zephyr in the docking bay. "Do you have any idea how many people would kill to own that creature?" Tom's fists clenched. "He's not an exhibit, and he's not for sale. Not everyone will respect that." "Yes," she said, "you're sitting on something the highest bidders in the galaxy would love to get their hands on. I'm sending you a protection detail." Tom shook his head. "I don't need protection." VS exhaled sharply. "Back, we are already intercepting transmissions from black market dealers trying to track Zephyr's whereabouts. There are bounty hunters moving toward your sector as we speak. This isn't just about you anymore." Tom's jaw tightened. He glanced over his shoulder. Zephyr was watching. He had been awake the whole time, listening, his silver eyes flickering with an unreadable expression. "I can take care of myself," Tom said in a low voice. VS's lips thinned. "Maybe, but can you take care of him?" That question hit like a punch to the gut. The transmission cut off, leaving Tom alone with his thoughts and Zephyr, who had remained silent through the entire exchange. Finally, the dragon spoke, "You should let them help." Tom shook his head. "I don't trust bureaucrats." Zephyr huffed a quiet laugh. "Neither do I." Tom ran a hand down his face. "So what do we do?" Zephyr tilted his head slightly. "I would say we leave before they find us." Tom blinked. "You want to run?" The dragon's eyes gleamed. "No," he murmured. "I want to fly." Tom stared at him for a long moment, then, despite everything, the threats, the uncertainty, the weight of it all, he smiled, muttering as he stretched his arms, "Guess we better get moving." With that, Zephyr's tail flicked with anticipation in his gaze. "Indeed." And just like that, Tom Braddock, former soldier and reluctant guardian of a talking dragon, found himself on the run from the entire galaxy. Tom had done a lot of reckless things in his life, but sneaking out of a government-monitored space station with an albino alien dragon ranked somewhere near the top. Zephyr sat coiled near the window of the apartment, his silver eyes watching the station outside with quiet calculation. He had barely moved since VS's call, as if he were already plotting something Tom hadn't quite caught up to yet. Tom stood at the center of the room, arms crossed, staring at his personal terminal, which was flashing with restricted access warnings. They had locked him down, no travel permits, no ship clearance, not even access to public docking records. VES had made sure he wouldn't be able to leave easily, but that didn't mean he couldn't leave. Tom let out a long breath, rubbing the back of his neck. "All right, big guy," he muttered, "got any genius ideas?" Zephyr shifted slightly, his tail flicking across the floor. "How attached are you to legal departure procedures?" Tom snorted. "Not at all." The dragon hummed approvingly. "Then I suggest we avoid the main docks entirely." He inclined his head toward the window. "A cargo freighter just arrived in Base 16. It belongs to the DR. Syndicate, not the most reputable crew, but their smuggling routes are effective." Tom frowned. "How do you even know that?" Zephyr's expression was unreadable. "I listen." That was a terrifying answer, but Tom had bigger problems right then. He glanced toward the station terminal's access logs. Bay 16 wasn't far but was heavily trafficked, the kind of place where security patrols wouldn't be thrilled to see a massive alien dragon walking through. Sensing Tom's concern, Zephyr said, "I am not without my own methods of evasion." Tom arched an eyebrow. "That's a fancy way of saying you're sneaky." Zephyr chuckled. "Something like that." Tom sighed. "This is insane. I was an ex-soldier, not a damn outlaw, but somehow, in the span of 48 hours, I've gone from retired veteran to galactic fugitive, and for some reason, I don't hate it. He muttered, grabbing his old combat jacket from the chair. Let's get off this rock before they decide to throw me in a cell. Zephyr uncoiled from his position, stretching his wings slightly before tucking them against his back. A wise choice. Tom shook his head, muttering under his breath, still can't believe I'm taking advice from a talking dragon. Zephyr's silver eyes gleamed. You could do far worse. Tom wasn't sure about that. The plan was simple: get to Base 16, find a way onto the cargo freighter, and leave before anyone notices. Reality, as usual, didn't care about simple plans. Tom and Zephyr moved through the lower sectors of the station, taking maintenance tunnels and back corridors to avoid the security checkpoints. Tom had spent years stationed here. He knew the blind spots, the weak patrol routes, the places where guards only half paid attention. Zephyr, for all his size, was eerily quiet. He moved with an unnatural grace, his steps careful and deliberate, his scales shimmered like moonlight when they passed under dim lights. More than once, Tom had to double-check that the dragon was still there. It should have been smooth, it wasn't. They were halfway to Base 16 when Tom's wrist communicator buzzed with a security alert. Attention all station personnel, Subject Thomas Braddock is under restricted status. If located, report immediately to Galactic Security Command. Tom cursed under his breath. VES isn't messing around. Zephyr, unfazed, merely tilted his head. She's efficient. You should be flattered. Tom shot him a look. Not the word I'd use. Then he heard it, the boots of a patrol squad. 6 armed men, rounding the corner of the main corridor ahead. Tom froze, instincts kicking in. No cover. No escape routes. The security officers had plasma rifles drawn, their armor gleaming under the station's artificial light. Zephyr went very still beside him. Tom had 2 seconds to make a decision. He turned, bracing himself, hands half raised in a non-threatening gesture. All right, let's talk about this, one of the officers said, raising his rifle. On your knees, Braddock. Zephyr sighed beside him. Negotiation has already failed. Tom barely had time to blink before Zephyr moved. In 1 second, the dragon was standing beside him, still silent and passive. In the next, he was a blur of white scales and silver eyes cutting through the air like a blade. The nearest guard didn't even get the chance to react. Zephyr's tail lashed out, catching him across the chest and sending him crashing into the wall, his rifle clattering uselessly to the ground. The others barely had time to raise their weapons before Zephyr vanished again, shifting his weight, moving between them like a ghost of something far too ancient to be fought with bullets and steel. Tom watched, half in awe, half in panic, as the dragon systematically disarmed every single one of them. A clawed foot knocked a rifle from one guard's hands, a flick of a wing sent another sprawling, and a final, precise strike with his tail swept the last one off his feet before he could get a shot off. Then, silence. Tom stood there, breath shallow, staring at the 6 unconscious men sprawled across the corridor. Zephyr exhaled softly, his silver eyes gleaming with something unreadable. They are not dead, he noted. Tom forced himself to take a breath. Yeah, I noticed, he said, not sure whether he was grateful or terrified. Zephyr stepped closer, his voice calm, we must move. Tom blinked, shaking off the moment. Right, yeah, before more show up. They sprinted the last stretch to Base 16, slipping into the cargo docks just as more security alerts flooded the station comms. The freighter was already loading cargo, its engines humming and preparing for launch. Tom spotted a half-open loading hatch, crates being transported inside. Think you can fit in there? Tom asked, pointing toward the hatch. They moved quickly, weaving through the stacked cargo, slipping past distracted workers and ducking into the shadows. As the ship's final checks counted down, the last crate was loaded and the hatch began to close. Tom lunged, grabbing the edge and pulling himself up. Zephyr followed with a powerful leap, his wings tucking close to clear the entrance just before it sealed shut. They landed inside the freighter cargo hold. The hum of the ship vibrated beneath their feet. Tom collapsed against the wall, exhaling sharply. That was not smooth. Zephyr, unbothered, curled himself up in the dim light, his silver eyes calm. "We are off the station." Tom let out a dry laugh, rubbing his face. "Yeah, now what?" Zephyr's tail flicked slightly. "Now we find out where we're going." Tom had a feeling he wasn't going to like the answer. The hum of the freighter engines thrummed beneath his boots, a steady vibration that filled the cargo hold with a sense of quiet urgency. They were off the station for now, which meant safety, but it wouldn't last, he knew that. And neither did Zephyr. The dragon lay coiled in the dim light, his long body draped over the scattered crates, his silver eyes half-lit but still sharp. He hadn't spoken since they'd slipped onto the ship. Tom figured he was thinking, or calculating, or doing whatever dragons did when they weren't busy effortlessly taking down trained security forces. Tom leaned back against the wall, arms crossed, his mind racing through the facts. They were on an unregistered smuggler freighter, with no way to know where it was headed until they broke out of hyperspace, no real plan, no allies, and no guarantee that whoever owned this ship wouldn't immediately sell them out the second they realized they had a talking, albino dragon on board. "Yeah, this is going great," he sighed, rubbing his temple. "You ever get the feeling that every time you make a decision, it just makes things worse?" Zephyr finally lifted his head, regarding Tom with mild amusement. "You regret leaving?" Tom let out a dry laugh. "Regret? No, just wondering if I should have asked VES for a head start before running like a fugitive." Zephyr hummed. "The commander would not have allowed that." "Yeah, figured as much." A brief silence fell between them, filled only by the steady pulse of the ship's engines. Tom closed his eyes for a moment, letting himself breathe, letting the exhaustion settle in now that the immediate threat had passed. But then the ship jerked violently, throwing Tom against the wall hard enough to rattle his teeth. A deep, shuddering groan reverberated through the hull. Tom's instincts kicked in immediately. Something was wrong. Zephyr's head snapped up, his body instantly tense, silver eyes flashing as he uncoiled. "That was not turbulence," Tom said, pushing off the wall and steadying himself. "Yeah, no kidding." The ship shook again, the engines hiccuped, the lights flickered in a way that sent an ugly feeling crawling up Tom's spine. Zephyr moved toward the nearest bulkhead, his claws clicking softly against the metal floor. "We need to find the bridge," Tom cursed under his breath, but didn't argue. He was already scanning the cargo hold for an exit, his eyes locking onto the maintenance hatch near the far wall up here. Zephyr followed without hesitation, his movements eerily silent as he leapt up onto the catwalk alongside Tom. They climbed through the hatch, emerging into a narrow corridor filled with flashing red emergency lights and the distant sound of shouting. Tom recognized that kind of shouting. It wasn't panic, it was battle commands. His stomach twisted. "We're under attack," he murmured. Zephyr's voice was calm. "Not by accident, I suspect." Tom clenched his jaw. "No, not by accident, someone has tracked us." The ship lurched again, a violent impact sending another tremor through the metal beneath them. Tom grabbed onto the nearest bulkhead to steady himself, his mind already running through worst-case scenarios, a hostile boarding, a targeted strike, VS's people having found them, or was this something worse? Zephyr moved ahead with unsettling grace, his body weaving through the dim corridor, his tail flicking behind him as he scanned their surroundings. Tom followed, his pulse hammering in his ears. Then they heard it, gunfire. Short bursts of plasma fire echoed from the forward deck, followed by the unmistakable roar of something tearing through metal and flesh alike. Tom's fingers twitched toward the weapon at his hip. Zephyr, however, simply stopped and listened. Then his silver eyes narrowed. "They are not here for the ship," the dragon murmured. Tom swallowed. "Yeah, they are here for me." That was the last thing Tom needed to hear before he could respond. The corridor ahead erupted in chaos. A figure, a smuggler by the look of it, judging by the worn-out body armor, staggered backward with a deep gash torn across his chest, his weapon falling from his fingers. He collapsed, and in his place stepped something Tom had never seen before. It was tall, nearly Zephyr's height, with an elongated form wrapped in black metallic plating that gleamed in the flickering emergency lights. Its head was sleek and angular, its eyes, nothing but burning slits of molten red. In its clawed hand, it held a jagged plasma blade dripping with energy residue. Tom knew a hunter when he saw one, and this was an executioner. Zephyr didn't move or flinch, but Tom could see the tension in his muscles, the way his claws flexed, the slight shift of his wings, a silent preparation for battle. The hunter tilted its head slightly, its molten eyes locking onto Zephyr. Then it spoke, target acquired. Tom had half a second to react. The hunter lunged, its plasma blade slashing toward Zephyr's chest. Zephyr dodged, his movements so fluid, so unnatural, that it was like watching a ripple through water. The plasma blade cut through empty air, slicing deep into the bulkhead with a hiss of vaporized metal. A shot fired, it hit the hunter square in the shoulder, sending it staggering back but not falling. Instead, it nodded its head toward Tom, as if acknowledging him for the first time. "I do not like that, Braddock," Zephyr said, his voice steady and calm, even as the hunter recovered. "You should run." Tom gritted his teeth. "Not a chance." The hunter charged again, but Zephyr was faster. This time, the dragon didn't dodge, he countered. His wings snapped out, catching the air in a sudden burst of movement. His claws struck first, raking across the hunter's armor with a screech of tearing metal. The creature reeled, but Zephyr pushed forward, twisting his body like a serpent. His tail snapped violently against the hunter's midsection, the force sending it crashing through the corridor wall and embedding it into the next chamber. Zephyr landed lightly, his silver eyes cold. "You will need more than that," he said. Tom stared, half impressed, half alarmed, as the hunter impossibly began to rise again. Zephyr exhaled sharply, his gaze flicking to Tom. "We need to move." Tom did not argue. They sprinted down the corridor, plasma fire bursting around them, alarms blaring. The freighter was falling apart, hit from the inside and out. Tom's mind raced as they dodged past fleeing crew members and the distant echoes of more hunters moving through the ship. Zephyr leapt ahead, wings flaring, leading them toward the only viable escape option. Tom glanced back just once, saw the hunter standing again, its red eyes burning brighter, and knew this wasn't over, not even close. The ship was dying, the smell of scorched metal and burning circuits filled the air as alarms screamed in protest, and Tom could hear the groaning of the hull, the telltale sounds of a freighter on the verge of tearing itself apart. Zephyr moved ahead of him, his form a blur of silver and white against the flickering lights, his movements precise and controlled even now, with the entire ship against them. The dragon never hesitated. Tom wasn't sure if that was bravery or madness. A plasma bolt slammed into the wall inches from his head, sending molten sparks across his arm. He gritted his teeth but didn't stop running. The hunters were relentless, their red eyes glowing through the smoke, their bodies moving with mechanical precision. "Zephyr, tell me, do you have an actual plan here?" Tom shouted over the alarms. Zephyr didn't stop. "The escape pods are ahead," he responded. Tom exhaled sharply. "And what happens when those things follow us?" Zephyr twisted his head back slightly, his silver eyes flashing. "Then we make sure they don't." Zephyr didn't look at him. "It will take out the ship and them," Tom swore, his heart pounding. "You're not going to have enough time to." "I will," Zephyr interrupted, his voice calm, but with something beneath it, something Tom had never heard before, a lie. Tom clenched his jaw and looked at the pod, then at Zephyr, then back at the pod. His body was screaming at him to move, to follow the plan to escape, but his instincts told him something else. They were telling him Zephyr didn't intend to leave this ship. Tom took a step back, shaking his head. No. Zephyr finally looked at him, his expression unreadable. Tom, he said again, stronger this time. I'm not leaving you behind. The dragon's silver eyes softened just slightly. If I stay, I can ensure the explosion takes them all out. Tom's hands curled into fists. And if you go, we can figure something else out. Zephyr exhaled slowly. You do not understand what they will do if they catch me. Tom stepped forward. And you don't understand that I don't care. You're not a damn diplomatic relic, Zephyr. You're not a weapon, you're not some symbol of power that needs to be erased. He placed a hand on the dragon's scaled chest, feeling the slow, steady beat of a heart that had been engineered, but was still real. You're my friend, he added for the first time since he had met him. Zephyr looked uncertain. A deep tremor rocked the ship as the reactor's final failsafes collapsed. The hunters were closing in, they were out of time. Zephyr hesitated for a second, then moved with a single, powerful leap. He landed beside Tom, his tail flicking the emergency launch sequence. The pod door sealed shut, and in the next instant, they were thrown into space. The freighter exploded behind them, a massive, blinding pulse of fire and shrapnel ripped through the void, consuming everything in its path. Tom's breath caught as the shock waves sent their pod spinning wildly, stars blurring past the viewport. Zephyr remained perfectly still beside him, watching as the ship and the hunters were reduced to nothing but burning wreckage. Finally, he let out a slow breath. I hope that was enough, he murmured. Tom exhaled. Yeah, he said. Me too. They drifted in space for hours. The emergency system stabilized the pod, slowing the uncontrolled spin and filtering oxygen to keep them alive. Outside the viewport, stars stretched endlessly in every direction, and the shattered remains of the freighter floated in the void. Tom sat against the bulkhead, rubbing his temples. Remind me never to hijack a smuggler ship again. Zephyr chuckled, his wings pressed against the pod's cramped walls. Tom glanced at him, the brilliant white scales reflecting the dim glow of the emergency lights, and the way his silver eyes flickered between exhaustion and something quieter, something unspoken. Tom started stretching his arms. Now what? He asked. Zephyr was silent for a long moment, then softly, I do not know. Tom frowned. No master plan, no diplomatic mission, no hidden purpose. Zephyr tilted his head slightly. I was given to you, but I no longer wish to be given. His voice held something hesitant, almost fragile. I wish to choose. Tom blinked, he hadn't expected that. Then again, he hadn't expected any of this. He let out a slow breath, leaning back. Well, he said, his voice softer now, you ever think about what you want? Zephyr considered this. I do not want to be hunted, he admitted. I do not wish to be a pawn in someone else's game. He looked at Tom and added, I do not wish to be alone. Tom felt something warm settle in his chest. Then we stick together, he said simply. Zephyr's silver eyes softened just like that. Tom smirked. Just like that. A silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, but new, like the beginning of a story. Then finally, Zephyr shifted slightly, glancing at the starfield beyond. I have never chosen my own name before, he murmured. Tom raised a brow. You don't like Zephyr? The dragon considered it. It is the name I was given, not the one I would choose. Tom tilted his head. So what would you choose? Zephyr was quiet for a long moment, then after a pause, he spoke, Ka. Tom smiled. Yeah, that fits. The pod's distress beacon finally activated, sending a signal into the dark. Somewhere out there, a ship would come, a new destination, a new beginning. And for the first time, Ka had a future that was his own.